Now, I'm not on my fuck the gaming industry shit, and I'm nowhere near close to the point where I would feel justified in saying that the industry has taken a turn for the worse. Have some developers fell off? Yeah. Have some improved the formula in ways I couldn't have even thought of? Yes. The main issue that I'm faced with in recent years, a lot of AAA titles pushing lackluster stories, which have seemingly been masked by upgrades in the graphics department. In some ways, I'm sure that the consumers are partially at fault for gassing up outrageously good graphics for games like Call of Duty and such, which are titans in the industry and what some developers might look to as a gold standard. But at the end of the day, it really does just come down to the lack of self-awareness from developers, unable to see when the dedication to the story versus the graphical upgrades are nowhere near equal, and to produce a product that would add to the game's legacy, not take away. In an industry so rapidly changing, when teams are constantly replaced, slimmed down, and added on to, it only makes sense that certain things would suffer, which you'd think would leave you with two options. Either take from the source material, i.e. books, movies, comics, etc., or pay attention to the dialogues within your community and figure out what it is that the people want. Creative freedom is obviously a wonderful thing and is important to developers, but taking over somebody else's franchise and changing it into your image, which is outrageously different from the original IP, that's not creative freedom, that's freedom of destruction. One of the best examples hurts me down to my core because it's a franchise which I've invested thousands of hours of my life into and refer to as my favorite series of all time, Halo. Halo 4 and 5 were painful attempts at Halo games, and while there were little gems that shone through the dirt, ultimately the games were failures. They focused so heavily on making outrageous graphic changes and a balanced COD-esque multiplayer, the campaign was seemingly placed on the back burner. I mean, this cutscene was made in 2015, come the fuck on. But long story short, that's at least what it feels like. The gameplay mechanics, maps, and storytelling overall just feels uninspired. Halo Infinite isn't exempt of this criticism, though I believe they took a step in the right direction. The open world map was monotonal, and the structures did not encourage a unique approach to what was once a pillar of the gaming industry for versatility and freedom. In Halo Combat Evolved, a game released over 2 decades ago, 2001, we saw in the second mission having us utilize all of our tools, giving us the freedom to choose who we save and when, and unique structures that inspired a multitude of approaches. Halo Infinite definitely brought back this in some sense, where it was completely missing in Halo 4 and 5. The Prometheans inspired no creative approach to gameplay, there was no structure to dismantling their fleets, they had healers that revived enemies so you had to kill them first, then snipers with one-shot cannons, and if that wasn't bad enough, teleporting fucking tanks of soldiers that would one-pump you like it was Fortnite. And then you pick off the stragglers after you take everything else in that order. But this isn't a hate video for 343 Industries, don't get me wrong. Halo Infinite was a step in the right direction, so I'll leave it at that. Though one could argue that the story felt lackluster there too. My point being that story in AAA games has felt like it's been on the back burner for a while now. You see it in massive media too, as movies and such, like Star Wars being a fantastic example. The Emperor came back, don't know how the fuck that happened. The Wookiee survived an explosion. Okay, man. I don't fully remember the movies, so if I'm wrong on that one, that's my bad, but you get what I mean. The graphics of the new shit is insane, pure eye candy, but the story is dog shit. Nobody who actually likes Star Wars likes these movies. My girlfriend does, because she hasn't watched any of the previous movies, so I mean, point fucking made. But not everything they put out is bad. The Mandalorian was great, and the spin-offs that follow weren't inherently terrible. My point isn't that everything put out is dog shit, and it seems as though things might be getting to a better point than it was a couple of years ago, where it seemed to be the height of graphics over story, but things aren't anywhere near perfect yet. And, you know, things aren't going to be perfect, but as close as they can be. AAA studios need to invest time into the community to not only find what the fans want, but also work with the source materials that exist for almost every franchise. The story is made for you, my boy. You just gotta follow it. On a higher note, I want to give props to games that haven't faltered under the pressure to make a perfect looking game. The new Spider-Man series is unreal in the best way possible. I remember playing this Xbox 360 Spider-Man, I think it was like the Amazing Spider-Man or whatever, and it felt so good. I'd play the random crime events long after the story was finished just because it felt like such a polished game. Spider-Man for the PS5 took everything good about the old games and made it better tenfold. Graphics look insane, story was better and included a lot of fan favorites. I mean, Source material, that's exactly what I'm asking for. The gameplay inspired versatility and unique approaches, and there were not 1 or 2, but 3 DLCs that were free in the PC release. I don't know about the PS5, but I know about the Steam release. All of which were fantastic and followed a coherent, engaging story. Sony took everything that made Spider-Man games great and went, okay, but what if we made it better though? And they delivered. Okay, I made my point, but I can't leave you without one last piece of controversial content. Zelda, Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. 2 extremely well-received games I've spent hundreds of hours in. What do you think I'll say about them? Surely something good. The story's mid. I love the games, don't get me wrong, but hear me out. You look at Skyward Sword, okay, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Twilight Princess, there's a coherent experience through all the games that build on the franchise and creates 3 fucking timelines of stories, each with unique narratives and aesthetics. Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, fuck all that. Useless now. And the series has been practically rebooted, following one of the most simple takes on the story ever. Low-key, I like Breath of the Wild a lot more than Tears of the Kingdom, like looking back on everything. As far as the story goes, anyways, the Calamity Ganon was an interesting take, and the underlying story of TOTK with the dragon, I'm not gonna say spoilers, but it was interesting. But when you compare it to what the series once was, and add in the fact that none of the stories prior to the games affected anything in the timeline except for essentially Skyward Sword being the beginning of the whole curse or whatever. Fuck, man, they were amazing games. I have hundreds of hours between the 2, but just because the gameplay was way better doesn't mean that the story is excused from mediocrity. I want to hear how much you guys hate me for this one, so let me know what you think. But you know, the TLDR is that the gaming industry is on its way back to being balanced, but some companies haven't learned the lesson yet. I hope we're headed back to where things were in the early 2000s, because that's what we call peak around here. That's pretty much all from me. See you guys.
So many things you know, I ain't fucking saying. I'm never here for no ops because we leaving them dead.